Velociraptor leads T-Rex to safety. What happens next is shocking. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The dense canopy of the prehistoric forest whispered with life. Birds with feathered plumes darted between ancient ferns, and the hum of insects filled the air. Sky moved silently through the underbrush, her keen eyes scanning for movement. She was small for a velociraptor, her lithe frame built more for speed than strength. Her feathers shimmered in the dappled sunlight, blending perfectly with the earthy greens and browns of the jungle. Survival was never guaranteed in this dangerous world, but Sky had learned to adapt. She was quick, clever, and observant, qualities that had kept her alive long after she was separated from her pack. Today, however, something felt different. The air was heavy, almost oppressive, and the usual chatter of the forest seemed subdued. Sky paused near a cluster of cycads, her head cocked to the side as she listened. A faint, guttural noise reached her ears, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't the call of a prey animal or the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was something much larger. Sky's claws scraped against the damp earth as she moved closer to the source of the noise, her instincts urging caution. The guttural sound repeated, a low rumble that seemed to shake the very ground beneath her feet. She crept through the dense foliage, each step measured and deliberate, her sharp eyes darting between the shadows. As she rounded a cluster of boulders, the source of the sound came into view. There, lying partially submerged in a muddy clearing, was a creature that dwarfed anything Sky had ever encountered, a Tyrannosaurus rex. Its massive body was sprawled awkwardly, one powerful leg trapped in the thick sludge. The beast's chest heaved with labored breaths, and its golden eyes flicked toward Sky with a mixture of exhaustion and defiance. Sky froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. A T-Rex was the apex predator of the forest, a force of nature that could crush her with a single bite. Yet, as she observed the scene, she realized that this one was different. The T-Rex, though massive and imposing, was vulnerable. Deep gashes marred its flank, and its movements were sluggish, each breath accompanied by a pained growl. For a moment, Sky debated her options. She could leave, disappear into the safety of the trees and let nature take its course. But something held her in place. Perhaps it was the faint glimmer of desperation in the T-Rex's eyes or the memory of her own struggles when she had been abandoned by her pack. Whatever it was, Sky couldn't bring herself to turn away. The T-Rex growled again, a warning that echoed through the clearing. Sky took a cautious step forward, her claws sinking into the soft earth. She wasn't foolish enough to approach directly, not when a single swipe of the creature's tail could end her life. Instead, she circled the clearing, keeping a safe distance as she studied the situation. The mud pit was deep, its edges slick and treacherous. The T-Rex's massive frame had sunk into it, and every attempt to free itself only seemed to make the situation worse. Its leg, twisted at an unnatural angle, was clearly injured, and the gashes along its side suggested a recent battle. Sky's gaze shifted to the trees beyond the clearing, her sharp senses picking up the faint rustle of movement. She wasn't the only one who had noticed the weakened predator. A rival pack of velociraptors, their sleek forms barely visible among the shadows, was watching from the edge of the forest. Their eyes gleamed with predatory intent, and their low, guttural calls sent a chill down Sky's spine. She knew what would happen next. The pack would strike, taking advantage of the T-Rex's vulnerability to bring it down. For them, it was an opportunity for an easy kill. For Sky, it was a reminder of the ruthlessness of the world they lived in. A world where survival often came at the expense of others. As the rival pack began to close in, Sky felt a surge of urgency. She didn't know why she cared about the fate of the T-Rex, but the thought of watching it fall to the pack filled her with a sense of unease. Perhaps it was because she saw a reflection of herself in the massive predator, a once mighty creature now reduced to vulnerability. The lead raptor of the pack let out a piercing call, signaling the attack. The velociraptors surged forward, their movements coordinated and deadly. Sky didn't have time to think. Acting on instinct, she darted into their path, her speed and agility allowing her to intercept them before they reached the T-Rex. Sky let out a shrill screech, her feathers puffing up in a display meant to make her appear larger. The rival raptors hesitated, their heads snapping toward her in surprise. Sky seized the opportunity, darting forward and slashing at the nearest raptor with her sickle-shaped claw. The pack snarled in response, their attention now fully focused on her. What followed was a chaotic dance of survival. Sky led the pack on a wild chase through the forest, using her intimate knowledge of the terrain to her advantage. She darted between trees, leaped over fallen logs, and squeezed through narrow gaps, always staying just out of reach. The rival raptors, though faster and stronger as a group, struggled to keep up with her unpredictable movements. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sky managed to lose the pack by diving into a dense thicket and remaining perfectly still. She held her breath as the raptors' calls grew fainter, their frustration evident as they abandoned the chase. When she was certain the danger had passed, Sky emerged from the thicket, her chest heaving with exertion. Her body ached, and her feathers were ruffled, but she was alive. More importantly, she had bought the T-Rex time. Sky returned to the clearing, her steps cautious as she approached the massive predator once more. The T-Rex's golden eyes locked onto her, its growl low and guttural. Sky didn't flinch. Instead, she dropped a small rodent she had caught earlier onto the ground and nudged it toward the T-Rex with her snout. The gesture was simple but profound. The T-Rex, though clearly confused, didn't attack. Instead, it watched as Sky moved closer, her movements slow and deliberate. She could see the exhaustion in its eyes, the way its body trembled with the effort of staying upright. "You're not alone," Sky seemed to convey through her actions. "I'll help you." For the first time in what felt like forever, the T-Rex relaxed. It lowered its massive head onto the ground, its body settling into the mud as if accepting its fate. But Sky wasn't ready to give up. She had made her choice, and she would see it through. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing, Sky began to work. She circled the injured T-Rex, whom she mentally began to refer to as Rogue, studying his predicament. The mud pit was thick and unforgiving, and Rogue's massive leg was stuck fast. If she was going to help him, she'd have to think fast and act even faster. Sky's sharp eyes scanned the surrounding forest, searching for anything she could use. Her gaze landed on a sturdy vine hanging from a nearby tree, its thick tendrils stretching toward the ground. She darted toward it, using her sharp claws to slice through the base and pull the vine free. With the vine in tow, Sky returned to Rogue, who watched her with wary curiosity. The massive predator let out a low rumble, his golden eyes flicking between the vine and the mud. Sky chirped softly, hoping to convey her intentions. She wrapped one end of the vine around a sturdy tree trunk and looped the other around Rogue's trapped leg, careful to avoid his sharp claws and teeth. It wasn't an elegant plan, but it was the best she could come up with. Sky positioned herself at the base of the tree, using her small but powerful frame to pull against the vine. She dug her claws into the earth, her muscles straining as she put all her weight into the effort. First, nothing happened. The mud held Rogue's leg like a vice, refusing to release its grip. Sky growled in frustration, her determination growing with each passing moment. She pulled harder, her feathers puffing out as she channeled every ounce of strength she had. Finally, Rogue seemed to understand what she was trying to do. With a low growl of effort, he pushed against the mud, his massive body trembling as he tried to free himself. Together, they strained against the unforgiving earth, their combined efforts creating a ripple of movement in the thick sludge. After what felt like an eternity, Rogue's leg began to budge. The mud clung stubbornly, but Sky and Rogue refused to give up. With one final, desperate pull, the T-Rex's leg broke free, sending a shower of mud and debris flying in all directions. Sky collapsed onto the ground, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. Rogue let out a triumphant roar, the sound echoing through the forest like a thunderclap. He staggered to his feet, his injured leg trembling but no longer trapped. Sky watched as Rogue took a tentative step forward, his massive frame looming over her. For a moment, she wondered if he would turn on her now that he was free. But instead of attacking, Rogue lowered his massive head and let out a low, rumbling sound. A sound that Sky interpreted as gratitude. The sun set behind the mountains, casting the forest in a deep orange glow. Sky and Rogue stood in the clearing, an unlikely pair united by circumstance. Sky knew that Rogue wasn't out of danger yet. His injuries were severe, and he was still weak from his ordeal. If they stayed here, it would only be a matter of time before predators returned, drawn by the scent of blood. Sky chirped softly, nudging Rogue with her snout. She motioned toward the trees, hoping he would understand. Rogue tilted his head, his golden eyes reflecting the fading light. Slowly, he began to follow her, his massive footsteps shaking the ground with each step. The journey through the forest was slow and treacherous. Rogue's injured leg made it difficult for him to move, and Sky had to constantly scout ahead, searching for paths that could accommodate his massive size. The forest was alive with danger. Hidden predators, steep ravines, and dense underbrush that threatened to trap them at every turn. Despite the challenges, Sky and Rogue moved forward, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. Sky hunted small prey, bringing it back to Rogue to keep him fed. In return, Rogue's towering presence deterred other predators, allowing Sky to focus on guiding him through the labyrinth of the forest. One night, as they rested near a bubbling stream, Sky found herself reflecting on her decision to help Rogue. She thought about her former pack, how they had abandoned her when she was injured and vulnerable. At the time, she had felt anger and betrayal, but now, looking at Rogue, she understood something deeper. Strength wasn't just about survival, it was about compassion and the willingness to help others, even when it was risky. Rogue let out a low rumble, drawing Sky's attention. He lowered his massive head, his golden eyes meeting hers. In that moment, Sky felt a connection that went beyond words. They were two creatures from different worlds, brought together by fate and united by a shared understanding of what it meant to fight for survival. The next day brought new challenges. As they made their way through a narrow canyon, the ground began to tremble beneath their feet. Sky froze, her sharp eyes scanning the cliffs above. A low rumble echoed through the canyon, growing louder with each passing second. Earthquake, she realized, her feathers puffing out in alarm. The ground shook violently, sending rocks tumbling from the cliffs. Sky screeched in warning, darting ahead to find a safe path. Rogue roared, his massive frame struggling to keep balance as the canyon walls threatened to collapse. Sky's heart raced as she spotted a narrow cave tucked into the base of the cliff. She chirped urgently, motioning for Rogue to follow her. The T-Rex hesitated, his injured leg making it difficult to move quickly. Sky darted back to him, nipping at his tail in an attempt to spur him into action. With a final, desperate lunge, Rogue followed Sky into the cave just as a massive boulder crashed into the ground behind them, sending a plume of dust and debris into the air. The cave was dark and cool, its walls shimmering faintly with moisture. Sky paced nervously near the entrance, her sharp eyes darting to the pile of rubble that now blocked their path. The earthquake had left the canyon in chaos, and they were effectively trapped for the time being. She clicked her claws against the stone floor, her mind racing as she tried to assess their options. Behind her, Rogue lowered himself onto the ground with a low rumble, his massive body taking up most of the space in the cave. His golden eyes flickered with exhaustion, and Sky could see that the ordeal was taking its toll on him. His injuries, combined with the strain of their journey, had left him weaker than ever. Sky approached cautiously, her small frame dwarfed by Rogue's immense size. She chirped softly, a sound meant to reassure him. Rogue's head tilted slightly, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, they simply watched each other, the silence filled with an unspoken understanding. Sky knew they couldn't stay in the cave for long. Though it offered temporary shelter, the lack of food and the blocked entrance meant they were vulnerable. She needed to find a way to clear the rubble or discover an alternate route out. With a determined chirp, she began exploring the cave, her sharp claws clicking against the stone as she moved. The cave extended deeper into the mountain than she had expected. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the dark corridors. Sky's keen eyes adjusted quickly to the dim light, and she picked her way carefully through the uneven terrain. As she ventured further, she discovered a small stream trickling through the cave, its clear water pooling in shallow depressions. She chirped with excitement, knowing that the water would be vital for Rogue's recovery. She quickly returned to the entrance, motioning for Rogue to follow her. Rogue struggled to his feet, his movements slow and deliberate. His injured leg trembled under his weight, but he pushed forward, his determination evident. Sky led him to the stream, watching as he lowered his massive head to drink deeply. The sound of his slurping echoed through the cave, a strangely comforting reminder that they were still alive. As Rogue rested by the water, Sky continued her exploration, hoping to find a way out. The cave twisted and turned, its passages narrowing and widening unpredictably. Sky's sharp senses kept her alert for any signs of danger, but the cave seemed deserted, its only inhabitants the occasional bat or insect. Finally, after what felt like hours, Sky's persistence paid off. She found a narrow tunnel that seemed to lead upward, its walls sloping gently toward what appeared to be an opening. Faint beams of sunlight filtered through the cracks, and Sky chirped in triumph. She darted back to Rogue, her excitement evident as she motioned for him to follow. The climb through the tunnel was slow and arduous. Rogue's massive frame barely fit through the narrow passage, and Sky had to guide him carefully to avoid triggering a collapse. She chirped encouragingly, her own body weaving effortlessly through the tight spaces. When they finally emerged into the sunlight, Sky let out a triumphant screech. They had made it out of the cave and into a dense forest, the air fresh and alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Rogue staggered out behind her, his golden eyes squinting against the bright light. The forest was unfamiliar, its towering trees and thick underbrush unlike the areas they had traversed before. Sky paused, her head swiveling as she took in their surroundings. She didn't know exactly where they were, but the abundance of vegetation and the distant sound of running water gave her hope. Sky led Rogue deeper into the forest, her movements careful and deliberate. She scouted ahead, searching for a safe place where they could rest and regroup. The forest was teeming with life, from the chirping of small dinosaurs darting through the underbrush to the distant roars of larger predators. Sky's senses were on high alert, every sound and movement analyzed for potential threats. Eventually, she found a sheltered clearing near a small pond. The area was surrounded by dense foliage, providing cover, and the pond offered a reliable source of water. Sky chirped softly, motioning for Rogue to rest. The T-Rex lowered himself onto the ground with a low rumble, his massive body blending into the shadows. As Rogue rested, Sky took it upon herself to gather food. She darted through the forest, her sharp claws and quick reflexes allowing her to catch small prey with ease. She brought her catches back to Rogue, laying them at his feet and chirping softly to encourage him to eat. At first, Rogue seemed reluctant, his injuries and exhaustion dulling his appetite. But Sky's persistence paid off, and he eventually began to eat, his strength slowly returning. The days passed in a rhythm of cautious survival. Sky and Rogue developed a strange but effective partnership, each playing to their strengths. Sky's agility and intelligence allowed her to navigate the forest with ease, while Rogue's sheer size and power provided a deterrent to potential threats. Together, they carved out a fragile existence in the heart of the wilderness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest was bathed in the golden glow of twilight, Sky and Rogue rested by the pond. The air was cool and still, the sounds of the forest fading into a peaceful hush. Sky lay curled up near Rogue's side, her feathers ruffling softly in the breeze. For the first time since their journey began, Sky allowed herself to relax. She felt a sense of connection to Rogue that went beyond survival, a bond forged through shared struggle and mutual trust. She chirped softly, a sound of contentment that seemed to echo through the clearing. Rogue let out a low rumble, his golden eyes reflecting the fading light. He lowered his massive head, his gaze meeting Sky's. In that moment, the lines between predator and prey blurred, leaving only the unspoken understanding of two creatures who had chosen to defy the odds together. The peaceful rhythm of their days in the forest was soon interrupted by the return of danger. Sky woke early one morning to the distant sound of thundering footsteps. Her sharp eyes scanned the horizon as she leapt to her feet, every muscle in her body tensed. The earth trembled beneath her claws, and the ominous rumble grew louder with each passing second. Rogue lifted his massive head, his golden eyes narrowing as his instincts took over. Sky chirped sharply, urging him to rise. They had faced challenges before, but the sound approaching them now was unlike anything they had encountered. Through the trees, a massive shadow emerged, its form sending a wave of fear rippling through Sky. It was a Giganotosaurus, a towering predator even larger than Rogue, its serrated teeth gleaming in the morning light. The Giganotosaurus let out a deafening roar, the sound reverberating through the forest and scattering smaller creatures in its wake. Sky's heart raced as she darted to Rogue's side. The T-Rex rose slowly, his injured leg still weak but functional. Rogue let out a low, guttural growl, his gaze locked on the approaching threat. Sky could see the tension in his massive frame, the determination that burned in his eyes. He wasn't going to back down, but she knew they couldn't face the Giganotosaurus head-on, not in Rogue's current state. Thinking quickly, Sky began to assess their surroundings. The forest was dense, its underbrush thick and tangled. While the Giganotosaurus had size and strength on its side, Sky and Rogue had something it didn't: agility and knowledge of the terrain. Sky chirped sharply, catching Rogue's attention. She motioned toward the trees, urging him to follow her. Rogue hesitated, his primal instincts telling him to stand his ground. But Sky chirped again, her urgency clear. Finally, Rogue relented, turning and following her into the dense forest. The Giganotosaurus roared in frustration, its massive frame crashing through the underbrush as it gave chase. Sky led Rogue through a labyrinth of narrow paths and hidden trails, her sharp mind working to outmaneuver their pursuer. She darted between trees, her smaller size allowing her to slip through gaps that the larger predator couldn't navigate. Rogue followed as best he could, his massive footsteps shaking the ground and leaving deep impressions in the soft earth. The chase was relentless, the Giganotosaurus crashing through the forest with terrifying speed. Sky's mind raced as she searched for a way to turn the odds in their favor. Her sharp eyes scanned the terrain, looking for anything that could be used to their advantage. Finally, she spotted it. A steep ravine hidden by thick vegetation. The ground sloped sharply downward, leading to a narrow river at the bottom. Sky chirped sharply, directing Rogue toward the ravine. The T-Rex hesitated for only a moment before following her lead. The Giganotosaurus was close behind, its massive footsteps shaking the ground as it closed the distance. Sky darted ahead, her claws digging into the soft earth as she scrambled down the slope. Rogue followed, his massive frame causing rocks and debris to tumble into the river below. As they reached the bottom of the ravine, Sky turned to face Rogue, her sharp eyes filled with determination. She chirped urgently, motioning toward a narrow gap between two large boulders. Rogue understood immediately, his instincts kicking in as he squeezed through the gap. The boulders, barely wide enough to accommodate his massive frame, created a natural barrier between them and their pursuer. The Giganotosaurus reached the edge of the ravine, its massive body looming over the narrow gap. It let out a deafening roar, its frustration evident as it tried to maneuver its way through. But the boulders were too closely spaced, and the predator's massive size worked against it. Sky and Rogue watched from the other side, their breaths coming in heavy bursts as the Giganotosaurus struggled to reach them. Sky chirped softly, her body relaxing slightly as she realized the immediate danger had passed. Rogue let out a low rumble, his golden eyes meeting hers with a mix of relief and gratitude. The bond between them, forged through countless challenges, felt stronger than ever. The Giganotosaurus eventually gave up, retreating with a final growl of frustration. Sky and Rogue remained in the ravine for a while longer, ensuring that the danger had truly passed before venturing out. The experience had left them shaken, but it also reinforced their determination to survive. Together, as they continued their journey through the forest, Sky noticed a change in Rogue. The once dominant predator, who had been weakened by his injuries and reliant on her guidance, now carried himself with renewed strength. His steps were steadier, his growls more assertive. It was clear that Rogue was regaining his confidence, and Sky couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in his progress. One afternoon, as they rested by a quiet stream, Rogue let out a low rumble, his golden eyes locking onto Sky. The sound was different from his usual growls, softer, almost thoughtful. Sky tilted her head, her feathers ruffling slightly as she chirped in response. Rogue lowered his massive head, his gaze steady and unyielding. Sky realized that he was acknowledging her, not just as a companion, but as an equal. It was a moment of mutual respect, a silent recognition of the bond they had formed. Their journey eventually led them to the edge of the forest, where the landscape opened up into a vast, rolling plain. The sight was both awe-inspiring and intimidating, the open space leaving them exposed to potential threats. But it also held the promise of new opportunities, a chance to find a place where they could finally rest and rebuild. Sky chirped softly, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. Rogue stood beside her, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the grass. Together, they stepped onto the plain, their partnership stronger than ever. The challenges they had faced had tested their limits, but they had emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. As they moved forward, Sky felt a sense of hope that she hadn't experienced in a long time. With Rogue by her side, she knew that anything was possible. The plains stretched endlessly before them, golden grasses swaying gently in the breeze. For the first time in weeks, the air felt open and calm, free of the suffocating tension that had plagued their journey through the forest. Sky trotted a few paces ahead of Rogue, her sharp eyes scanning for any signs of danger or opportunity. Behind her, Rogue lumbered forward with a steady gait, his injured leg improving with each passing day. The open landscape was a stark contrast to the dense forest they had left behind, and while it provided fewer hiding spots, it also allowed them to see any potential threats from a distance. Sky chirped softly, her feathers ruffling in the breeze as she turned to check on Rogue. The massive T-Rex met her gaze with a low rumble, his golden eyes filled with a sense of quiet determination. As they made their way across the plains, Sky began to notice subtle changes in the environment. The grass grew taller in some areas, dotted with clusters of wildflowers and small shrubs. Herds of herbivorous dinosaurs grazed in the distance, their movements slow and peaceful. Sky's sharp instincts remained on high alert, but the sight of the grazing herds gave her a rare sense of tranquility. It wasn't long before they encountered their next challenge. As they approached a small hill, the wind shifted, carrying with it a new scent, one that made Sky's feathers bristle. She froze, her claws digging into the earth as she sniffed the air. The scent was unmistakable. Predators. Rogue growled softly, his head swiveling as he scanned the horizon. Sky chirped in warning, motioning for him to stay low. Together, they crept to the top of the hill, careful to keep their movements silent. Below them, a pack of Deinonychus prowled near a watering hole. The predators, smaller but no less dangerous, were sleek and agile, their sharp claws glinting in the sunlight. Sky counted at least 6 of them, their movements coordinated as they stalked a herd of grazing hadrosaurs. Sky turned to Rogue, her mind racing. They needed water, and the watering hole was the only source they had seen for miles. But the presence of the Deinonychus pack made the situation perilous. Rogue growled softly, his golden eyes narrowing as he assessed the scene. Sky knew they couldn't wait for the pack to leave. The plains were vast, and there was no guarantee they would find another source of water before dehydration set in. She clicked her claws against the ground, her mind working through the possibilities. Rogue watched her, his massive frame tensed as he waited for her decision. Finally, Sky chirped softly, motioning for Rogue to follow her. She led him along the ridge, keeping them hidden as they circled around the watering hole. Her plan was simple. Approach from the opposite side, where the pack's attention was focused on the hadrosaurs. With any luck, they could drink without drawing too much attention. As they crept closer, Sky's heart pounded in her chest. The Deinonychus pack was fully engrossed in their hunt, their sharp eyes fixed on their prey. Sky and Rogue moved silently, their steps carefully placed to avoid making noise. They reached the edge of the watering hole, the cool water shimmering invitingly in the sunlight. Sky chirped softly, signaling Rogue to drink. The massive T-Rex lowered his head, his sharp teeth glinting as he lapped at the water. Sky stood guard, her sharp eyes scanning the pack for any signs of movement. For a moment, it seemed as though their plan had worked. The pack remained focused on the hadrosaurs, their sleek bodies moving in unison as they closed in on their target. But just as Sky began to relax, a sudden movement caught her attention. One of the Deinonychus, smaller than the others but no less dangerous, had spotted them. The predator let out a sharp call, its head snapping toward Sky and Rogue. The rest of the pack froze, their attention shifting to the new arrivals. Sky chirped sharply, her feathers puffing out as she stepped in front of Rogue. The Deinonychus pack hesitated, their sharp claws digging into the earth as they assessed the situation. While Rogue's massive size was intimidating, his injuries were evident, and the pack seemed to sense his vulnerability. The lead Deinonychus let out a piercing screech, signaling the pack to advance. Sky's heart raced as the predators began to move, their sleek bodies circling like a storm of teeth and claws. She clicked her claws against the ground, her sharp mind racing as she tried to devise a plan. Rogue let out a deep, guttural roar, his golden eyes blazing with defiance. The sound echoed across the plains, sending the grazing hadrosaurs scattering in all directions. The Deinonychus pack faltered, their movements hesitant as they reevaluated their strategy. Sky seized the moment, darting toward the lead Deinonychus with a sharp screech. Her speed and agility caught the predator off guard, her claws slashing across its snout before it could react. The lead Deinonychus let out a startled cry, stumbling backward as Sky darted away. Rogue, inspired by Sky's boldness, roared again, his massive frame towering over the pack. The ground seemed to tremble beneath his feet as he took a step forward, his sharp teeth bared in a display of raw power. The pack hesitated, their sleek bodies tensing as they assessed the situation. While they outnumbered Rogue and Sky, the T-Rex's size and ferocity were not to be underestimated. The lead Deinonychus snarled, its sharp eyes narrowing as it made a decision. With a sharp screech, the pack retreated, their sleek forms disappearing into the tall grass. Sky let out a triumphant chirp, her feathers ruffling as she turned to Rogue. The massive T-Rex lowered his head, his golden eyes meeting hers with a look of quiet gratitude. For the rest of the day, Sky and Rogue stayed near the watering hole, taking turns drinking and resting. The encounter with the Deinonychus pack had been a close call, but it had also solidified their bond. Sky knew that together, they could face whatever challenges the plains had in store. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sky and Rogue lay side by side near the water's edge. The air was cool and still, the sounds of the plains fading into a peaceful hush. For the first time in weeks, Sky allowed herself to relax, her small body curling up against Rogue's massive frame. In that moment, they were more than just predator and prey. They were partners, united by a shared will to survive and a bond that transcended the boundaries of their species. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Sky closed her eyes, her heart filled with a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning brought a new sense of purpose. As the first rays of sunlight spilled over the plains, Sky awoke to find Rogue already on his feet. The T-Rex stood at the edge of the watering hole, his golden eyes scanning the horizon with a renewed focus. His injuries, though still visible, seemed less debilitating now. Rogue's movements were more confident, and there was a quiet strength in the way he held himself. Sky chirped softly, stretching her small frame as she rose to join him. The bond they had formed during their journey had grown stronger with each challenge they faced. and Sky felt an unspoken connection to the massive predator. Together, they had defied the odds, surviving dangers that would have overwhelmed them alone. As they set off across the plains, Sky led the way, her sharp eyes scanning for signs of danger or opportunity. The golden grass swayed in the breeze, and the distant calls of herbivorous dinosaurs filled the air. It was a reminder of the delicate balance of life in this prehistoric world, where every moment was a battle for survival. Their journey brought them to a rocky outcrop that jutted out of the plains like an ancient sentinel. The rocks were weathered and worn, their jagged edges providing natural shelter from the elements. Sky chirped with excitement, motioning for Rogue to follow her. The outcrop offered a strategic vantage point, as well as a place to rest. Rogue lumbered up the slope, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the ground. As they reached the top, Sky perched on a flat rock, her feathers ruffling in the breeze. From here, she could see for miles in every direction, the vast expanse of the plains stretching out like an endless sea. The view was breathtaking, but Sky's sharp eyes quickly locked onto something unusual in the distance. A thin column of smoke rose into the sky, its dark tendrils curling against the pale blue backdrop. Sky chirped softly, her head tilting as she tried to make sense of the sight. Rogue let out a low rumble, his gaze following hers. The smoke was unlike anything they had encountered before, and its presence filled Sky with a sense of unease. She clicked her claws against the rock, her mind racing as she considered their next move. Sky's instincts told her that the smoke was worth investigating, but it also posed a potential risk. If it was caused by a wildfire, they would need to avoid it at all costs. But if it was something else, something unnatural, it could hold the key to understanding more about their world. After a moment of hesitation, Sky chirped decisively, motioning for Rogue to follow her. The T-Rex growled softly, his massive frame moving with surprising grace as he descended the rocky slope. Together, they made their way toward the source of the smoke, their movements cautious and deliberate. The journey was slow, the terrain growing rougher as they approached the rising column of smoke. The golden grasses gave way to patches of scorched earth, and the air grew thick with the scent of ash. Sky's heart raced as they drew closer, her sharp eyes scanning the landscape for any signs of danger. As they crested a small hill, the source of the smoke came into view. Sky froze, her feathers puffing out as she took in the sight before her. A massive, charred carcass lay sprawled across the ground, its twisted form barely recognizable. The remains of a Giganotosaurus were scattered across the scorched earth, its once mighty frame reduced to little more than a pile of bones and ash. Sky chirped softly, her sharp mind working to piece together what had happened. The carcass showed no signs of a typical predator attack. There were no claw marks or bite wounds. Instead, the burns and the surrounding devastation suggested something far more destructive. Rogue let out a low growl, his golden eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scene. Sky could sense his unease, and she shared his apprehension. Whatever had caused this destruction was still out there, and it was unlike anything they had encountered before. As they explored the area, Sky's sharp eyes caught sight of something glinting in the sunlight. She darted toward it, her claws clicking against the scorched ground. The object was unlike anything she had seen before. A shard of blackened stone, its surface smooth and reflective. Sky chirped softly, nudging the shard with her snout. Rogue approached cautiously, his massive frame casting a shadow over the strange object. He sniffed the air, his growl low and guttural. The shard radiated an unnatural heat, and its presence filled Sky with a sense of unease. She clicked her claws against the ground, her sharp mind working to understand what it could mean. The discovery of the shard marked a turning point in their journey. Sky and Rogue continued their trek across the plains, their bond growing stronger with each step. The challenges they faced were numerous: treacherous terrain, dangerous predators, and the ever-present uncertainty of their world. But through it all, they relied on each other, their partnership a testament to the resilience of life. As they traveled, Sky began to notice changes in Rogue. The massive T-Rex, once weakened and vulnerable, now carried himself with renewed strength. His movements were confident, his growls assertive. It was clear that he had regained much of his former power, and Sky couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in his progress. One evening, as they rested beneath the stars, Sky chirped softly, her small frame curling up against Rogue's side. The air was cool and still, the sounds of the plains fading into a peaceful hush. In that moment, they were more than just companions. They were partners, united by a bond that defied the odds. As the days turned into weeks, Sky and Rogue continued their journey, their bond growing stronger with each passing challenge. They encountered new landscapes, from towering cliffs to lush valleys, each one more breathtaking than the last. Their journey was a testament to the resilience of life, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there was always hope. Through it all, Sky and Rogue remained steadfast, their partnership a beacon of strength in an uncertain world. They had faced countless dangers, but they had emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. The journey was far from over, but Sky and Rogue knew that together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their story was one of survival, of trust, and of the unbreakable bond between two unlikely allies. As Sky and Rogue journeyed deeper into the plains, the landscape began to shift once again. The golden grasslands gave way to rocky outcroppings and narrow gorges, the terrain growing more rugged with each step. The air was cooler here, the sky often clouded with thick, gray mist. It was a stark reminder of the ever-changing nature of their world, a world that demanded constant adaptation. Sky led the way, her small frame darting between rocks and crevices as she scouted for potential threats. Rogue followed closely behind, his massive form navigating the uneven terrain with surprising ease. His strength had returned in full, his movements confident and deliberate. It was a far cry from the weakened predator Sky had first encountered, and she felt a swell of pride every time she looked at him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Sky and Rogue stumbled upon a hidden valley nestled between the cliffs. The valley was unlike anything they had seen before. A lush, green oasis filled with towering ferns and crystal-clear streams. The air was alive with the sounds of chirping insects and the rustle of small creatures darting through the underbrush. Sky chirped softly, her feathers ruffling as she stepped into the valley. The soft earth beneath her claws was cool and damp, a welcome change from the harsh, dry terrain they had traversed for so long. Rogue let out a low rumble, his golden eyes scanning the area with curiosity. It was clear that this place was untouched by the dangers that plagued the rest of the plains, a sanctuary hidden away from the chaos of the outside world. The two of them explored the valley, their movements cautious but filled with wonder. Sky darted between the ferns, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. She spotted small, brightly colored dinosaurs grazing near the streams, their movements peaceful and unhurried. Rogue, for his part, seemed content to simply observe, his massive frame blending into the lush surroundings. As night fell, Sky and Rogue settled near the largest stream, its waters shimmering in the moonlight. Sky curled up against Rogue's side, her small frame dwarfed by his massive presence. The air was cool and still, the sounds of the valley creating a soothing melody that lulled her to sleep. The days in the valley passed in a peaceful rhythm. Sky and Rogue fell into a routine, exploring the area during the day and resting near the stream at night. The valley provided everything they needed: fresh water, abundant prey, and shelter from predators. It was a rare and precious reprieve from the challenges of their journey, and Sky found herself wishing they could stay here forever. But even in this paradise, the outside world was never far away. Sky often found herself glancing toward the cliffs that bordered the valley, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. She knew that their journey wasn't over, that the challenges they had faced so far were just the beginning. One afternoon, as Sky perched on a rock overlooking the valley, she noticed something unusual. A shadow moved along the cliffs, its shape too large to belong to any of the creatures that called the valley home. Sky's feathers ruffled, her instincts kicking into high alert. She chirped sharply, signaling Rogue to join her. The shadow grew closer, and Sky's heart raced as she recognized the creature. It was another T-Rex, its massive frame moving with a predatory grace that sent a chill down her spine. The newcomer was larger than Rogue, its scales darker and its eyes colder. It was clear that this T-Rex was a dominant predator, and it had no intention of sharing the valley. Rogue let out a low growl, his massive frame tensing as he stepped forward to confront the intruder. Sky darted to his side, her sharp claws clicking against the rocks as she prepared for what was to come. The valley had been their sanctuary, but now it was a battleground, and they would have to fight to keep it. The dominant T-Rex let out a deafening roar, its golden eyes locking onto Rogue. The sound echoed through the valley, sending smaller creatures scattering in all directions. Rogue responded with a roar of his own, his powerful voice carrying the weight of his defiance. The two predators clashed in a storm of teeth and claws, their massive bodies colliding with enough force to shake the ground. Sky darted around the edges of the fight, her sharp mind working to find a way to help Rogue. She knew that her small size made her no match for the dominant T-Rex, but she also knew that her speed and intelligence could tip the scales in their favor. As the battle raged on, Sky spotted an opening. The dominant T-Rex had pinned Rogue against a cluster of rocks, its powerful jaws snapping dangerously close to his throat. Sky chirped sharply, darting toward the predator's exposed flank. She leapt onto its side, her sharp claws digging into its scales as she delivered a series of quick, precise slashes. The dominant T-Rex roared in pain, its attention momentarily shifting to Sky. Rogue seized the opportunity, using his powerful legs to push the predator away. The two T-Rexes separated, their massive frames heaving with exertion as they prepared for the next round. The battle continued, each predator refusing to back down. Sky's role as a distraction proved invaluable, her quick movements and sharp claws keeping the dominant T-Rex off balance. Rogue, emboldened by her support, fought with a renewed determination, his roars echoing through the valley like thunder. Finally, with one last powerful strike, Rogue delivered a devastating blow to the dominant T-Rex. The predator stumbled backward, its massive frame crashing to the ground. It let out a low, guttural growl before retreating, its dark form disappearing into the shadows of the cliffs. The valley was silent once again, the air heavy with the aftermath of the battle. Sky darted to Rogue's side, chirping softly as she examined his injuries. The fight had taken its toll, but Rogue's strength and resilience had carried him through. As the days passed, Rogue and Sky healed together, their bond stronger than ever. The valley, once a peaceful sanctuary, had become a symbol of their triumph, a testament to their determination and the unbreakable connection they shared. Though their journey wasn't over, Sky and Rogue knew that they had found something rare and precious in each other. Together, they had faced the dangers of their world and emerged stronger, their partnership a beacon of hope in an uncertain land. As the sun set over the valley, casting the cliffs in a warm golden light, Sky and Rogue stood side by side. The future was uncertain, but they faced it together, their hearts filled with the knowledge that they could overcome anything. Their journey would continue, but for now, they were at peace. And in a world of predators and prey, that was the greatest triumph of all.